leader. I build brands for lifestyle brands. And on behalf of the city, Chattahoochee Brick Company Memorial Green Space Board, I bring you greetings. So thank you for being here. Before I jump into my welcome, I want to be sure to acknowledge if there's any, I don't think we have any elected officials here, but if there are, please stand and let us acknowledge you. Okay. The mission of the Chattahoochee Brick Company Board is to promote public trust and engage in thoughtful, inclusive, transparent, and collaborative process for the visioning, planning, and designing of the site. So you all are here to help us figure out what the site looks like and what it becomes. We are all champions of the work, so the folks that are on the board are very much engaged in the work. And as these projects move through the planning and design phase, we're here to bring awareness to what happens along the Chattahoochee River, what's happened in the past, and also memorialize and commemorate the importance of it. So if you're joining us for the first time at one of these meetings, welcome. But if you've been along the journey with us, thank you for being here and coming back. We appreciate your work and your commitment to the projects. So we want to take a few minutes to invite you all to kind of get to know each other. So old school church style, if you don't mind looking at your neighbor next to you and introducing yourself and maybe giving just a little bit of the reason why you're here today. So we'll take a minute to pause and do that. Okay. Thank you. I see a lot of folks making connections and getting to know each other. If we're going to go ahead and get settled back down, we'll get going with the program. Okay. Thank you all so much for your commitment, wisdom, and just for the spirit of being here and wanting to engage in the community. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Monique Forte. She's Assistant Director in the City of Atlanta's Office of Design. So Monique is going to walk us through the framework, so thank you.
Good morning. I'm Monique. Thank y'all for coming. It's important for us to come together, and we appreciate your time, your presence, and your commitment to this project. So again, thank you. Are there any, if the city staff, any other city staff could raise their hands? So we have quite a few folks over here to guide you if you need any, if you have any questions or where the bathroom is or any of those things, right? So we'll get right to it. Okay. So for us, for anyone who's joining us for the first time, or if you need a refresher, this is why I'm here. We want to start by stepping back and taking a look at the bigger picture. This work is part of a greater connected effort we are building together. So here is the fuller picture. This is a 100-mile stretch of the Chattahoochee Riverlands. This is a greater regional vision. And as you can see, I'm gonna try to point. This is where we are. So this is the larger vision. It stretches from like the Beaufort Dam and Lake Lanier to, let me make sure I'm getting this right. Yes, to Chattahoochee Bend State Park. Okay. So for us, here is the potential trail, the Atlanta Riverlands. And this is the Chattahoochee Brick Company site that the city purchased. And we don't look at these projects as separate. This is one connected vision. I'm sorry, the clickers. Okay. So all right, sorry about that. So with the shared vision, you have the Atlanta Riverlands here that will we will have an entrance into this park. There will be a community and memorial aspect to acknowledge and memorialize the victims of the convict leasing that happened on the Chattahoochee Brick site. And so this is all one, so this will be all one connected experience. This is not intended to work separately at all. All right, so this is the vision. This is the vision that we have for this shared experience. And I'll read it for you. The Chattahoochee Brick Company Memorial and Park, along with the Atlanta Riverlands Trail, will reflect on the past, restore the land, and reconnect the communities to the Chattahoochee River. This is our North Star. This is something we always go back to ground at any parts of this project. And it's very important for us to always look to this. So with that, I am going to hand it off to Kate Orff. She is the principal of SCAPE to talk about more of this experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. So thank you for being here in this beautiful auditorium. And it's our job as a design team to take that statement of purpose and translate it into a concept design. But first, I want to start with photographs of the site, which I believe many of you probably know well, or you've been here. And if you haven't been here, here's a snapshot of the current conditions of the site. And as a team, we understand that there's a lot of healing that's already been happening with the land. You have forests, you have emergent meadows, you have relics. And so it's what we're really focused on is taking a very deep and thoughtful look at what is on the site now and transforming that into a very meaningful and intentional memorial park and green space. I think you'll have to advance the slides for me. Here we go. So importantly, we've heard you at several community meetings already, and this is our team's synthesis of synthesizing what we've heard from you into design principles. There's a board of this out in front. So if we're missing a design principle or if there's an aspect of this that does not feel right, please make a comment on the board because there's a big section that says what is missing. But firstly, consider the entire site as a memorial. Some areas may be more reflective, some more celebratory, but the brick site in its entirety should be treated as a place for acknowledging history and reflecting on the past. Second, revealing traces and flows of the site's past. The site design can expose material and ecological shifts of the past, including traces of human experiences, including the individuals who were convict lease laborers here, and archaeological materials, which you'll hear about in a minute. Connecting spaces. This site is rather isolated right now in the city. So we need to connect and use creative circulation such as loops, meanders, and memorial paths to organize movement and allow different users to experience distinct spaces and reflect and respectfully experience different types of spaces depending on what their purpose is. Reuse and transform existing site materials. You saw there were piles of modern bricks there, right? There are pieces of the past that we are respecting. These existing site materials can be gently reused and transformed, particularly the large slabs and the bricks that you see. materials that can be transformed into new uses, forms, and interpretations. So that allows for kind of a creative spark, a creative interpretation of these materials. Support ecological healing and restoration. Areas should be focused on restoration, healing local ecosystems where possible, and protecting areas with high ecological values. That beautiful, intact forest that has stories to tell. Inviting life from the Riverlands and, of course, Proctor Creek. The site design can integrate with the Riverlands Trail and these water bodies as key nodes along the larger Atlanta reach. Centering community joy and gathering. So in addition to reflection and remembrance, we need to make space for joy and gathering, bringing people together to create new memories, space for community gathering, conversation, and celebration. And importantly, what we heard from you is that the site needs to bridge history with future action, not just looking backwards, but really looking forward to extend the role of the memorial beyond remembrance by fostering ongoing learning, collective reflection, and action, using the history of the Chattahoochee Brick site as a foundation for dialogue, awareness, and future change. So a few more notes about the physical site itself. It is about 75 acres, but the primary usable area is about 40 acres, which is above the base flood elevation. But you have beautiful floodplain forests, you have a former brownfield sort of meadow here, you have Proctor Creek winding its way through. But our intervention, primarily, although we'll be looking at restorative landscape around the entire site, the primary intervention will likely be in the pink zone. And that translates into this next diagram, next, which is the center, which is primarily for likely reflection and remembrance, where we have another zone of a more open field, potentially of where gathering and other park uses can happen. And then we have more of a perimeter of growth, regeneration, and restoration. So this is likely the kind of overall site zoning next. Okay, so what we've heard so far is very important from you. And these quotes are from you directly, one-to-one. So I wanted to just take a minute. Maybe you'll see your own words up here. Acknowledging that we should create a living memorial, acknowledging the lives and labor of those who shaped this place. The site should reveal the truth of Atlanta's history and the brutal legacy of conflict leasing. The site is rare and urgent and can stand in defiance of efforts to erase African American history. Another cluster here. I want an event space that opens up to the river with views and access, benches, quiet water features, and spaces for reflection within natural beauty. A space where the community can participate. Rewild the site. The site should trace the clay from river to factory, telling the labor story and imagining a reverse path of repair through planting and healing. Next. So it's our team's collective job, along with you, to combine all of that deep insight, the physical site constraints and opportunities, and your feedback over the series of meetings into two conceptual approaches. And you don't have to think about them as A and B. You can think about when we meet you next, we will have two conceptual approaches that you can comment on to say what you like, what doesn't feel right, what feels great. We're here right now in April with our second community meeting, and now in July on the 25th, we'll be back with these two approaches at the Fan Recreation Center. So you'll really have a chance to look at something very specific and respond to it. So we have a collaborative design team. Could I just ask everybody in the design team to raise your hands too? We have Grace, we have Dr. Jelks, okay, and everybody here. And so with diverse experience, and we'll be at the stations also out in the hallway to hear your additional feedback. It's a team of technical experts. Our last community meeting, we had about 120 attendees, almost 60 public memory activities, scans, bricks created. This was this amazing brick quilt concept. We need more bricks, and 17 community tables. So thank you for participating. And today, our task is this, to hear more about the preliminary conversations. The design team has had many, many small conversations with specific groups, people. We're going to do a deep dive into the archaeology and learn more about the historical research and the findings. We'll learn more about the Atlanta Riverlands itself, the trail, and understand the alignment scenarios. And then we'll ask you to adjourn and give feedback at these stations. Now over to Jadi.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Y'all. Don't play with me. I flew all the way from Boston. Y'all better give me some energy. Good morning, everyone. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm Jadi Amazi. I'm a principal at Mass, and our team is collaborating with the larger design team to help think about how memory and memorialization is going to land on the site. And so I'm going to share with you some of the preliminary feedback that we've been getting from the community engagement sessions. As has already been mentioned, this is our third meeting. Our first was in November of last year. It was a project orientation. It was an open house. Our second meeting was March 7th, where we had an introduction to the Public Memory and Memorials Lab that I lead alongside my colleagues. And this one, we are focused on visioning and programming for the park and the memorial. So speaking of the last session, I promise y'all, we rehearsed with this clicker and it was doing great previously. But in our last session, we did have an opportunity to guide folks that were in attendance through a collage exercise where we asked each person to reflect on what they want people to learn, see, do, and feel at the site. And so we used precedent imagery to kind of kickstart folks' imaginations through this exercise. And these next few slides are a high-level synthesis of this. We will have a full report that gives you more information, but we just want to give you a high overview of the sentiments. And so some of the things that people reflected on as it relates to learning, of course, folks talked about wanting to learn a deeper understanding of the site, but that understanding alone is not enough. There's really this desire for this history to be understood in current context and for people to be able to internalize the information and understand more intimately how that's impacting current day, both our lives and the lives of others. So making these connections in understanding this deep history. And then of course there was a desire to, many folks expressed the desire to have this learning and this acknowledgement of the history be able to move us towards a more reflective and hopeful future. And so how does the past inform our present and articulate the future that we want to have together? So those are some of the things that we heard from Learn. In C, we used a number of precedent images, as I mentioned before, to spark people's imaginations, to ask folks what they might want to see on the site. And some of what we heard here is that, there were a broad range of responses, which is also always good. But one of the things that kind of stuck out was that folks really wanted to see things that were a little bit more minimal on the site, not really aggressive interventions. And so folks were thinking of signage that is more integrated into nature was some of the high-level feedback we got there. Landscape and memorial gardens, as well as sculptural landscape installations, were the most frequently referenced images in the exercises, whereas figurative sculptures and reconstructions were the least. That is not to say that they were not referenced. This is just quantitative data that we're presenting back to you all. There's also qualitative feedback that we received in written format that we'll be incorporating as well. But by the numbers, this is what we found. Folks also talked about a need for shade and places to rest. Kate just told you this is a 40-acre park site, so we're certainly thinking about how folks will be on the site for extended periods of time. Where will they access shade and rest? And then a connection to water. How will we bring water into the site and a connection for that? As far as feel, or maybe actually do is next, some of the things that we heard here or saw in the collages is that while some folks asked for a range of activities, a lot of preferences were for something simpler. So again, going back to benches, places for relaxation, places for respite. We also saw that collective learning was most frequently referenced in the opportunities for what people would do on the site, and followed by that were places for respite and reflection. So as I'm learning this history, as I'm taking in all of this information, where am I going to retreat? Where am I going to be able to sit with this information is something that we heard. And then a couple of folks expressed wanting an event space, although that was not incorporated in the image bank, but you will see it out on the boards today because that is very much part of programming. So it was a preemptive look into that. And then lastly, for feel, okay. For feel, rather than using precedent imagery, we actually referenced movie titles and song titles because it's kind of hard sometimes to visualize feelings. So we use these cultural references to get folks in the vibe of where we were trying to get them to be. This was also a section where people could write in a feeling if they were not familiar with any of these titles. And what we learned here is that folks are really leaning into feelings of empowerment and being well informed. We also heard that, many people wanted visitors to have an emotional journey through the site, have an emotional reaction, a visceral reaction to learning this information, beginning with reflection, but ultimately landing in a place of joy and renewal. So while they wanted the information to be felt and the history experience to be emotional, they did not want folks to just simply leave from the site overwhelmed. How do we point people back to hope? Last thing I just want to share is that in addition to these larger format community sessions, if we could go to the next slide, in addition to these larger community sessions that we've been having, the Memorial team, in collaboration with Scape and Chrysalis, has also been hosting a number of small group discussions with various focus groups in the community. So we've met with AUC students, high school students, justice impacted folks. We have meetings scheduled with church communities, elders, and the like, in order to be able to have a little bit more nuanced, intimate conversations. And some of the things that we're hearing from these conversations very much align with what we're hearing in the larger group. And that is that, some folks want a self-guided experience, but again, it's about having this visceral reaction that will spark collective action. What are you going to do when you leave from the site once you learn this history? Other things that we are hearing is that they don't want the information to be sanitized in any way. They want it to be radically, historically accurate. Radical truth-telling on the site is important. There needs to be a productive balance between helping visitors to understand the history without traumatizing them. So how do we go deep and really help you to understand what took place in this site, as well as across the city, without just traumatizing you or traumatizing folks that are coming to the site. And then there's this emphasis on the site being sacred ground, this insistence that we are going to honor all of those who were forced to labor on the site and across the city. So how do we really help folks to understand the children, the women, and the men that were impacted by this practice of convict leasing labor? And then ultimately making this overt connection between the racialized criminalization of Black bodies across history and how that still persists today. So these are some of the things that we are hearing. Again, these are the overarching synthesis. Of course, there's so much more nuance, but I would be up here for 2 more hours if I tried to get it all in there. So please do come ask us questions if you have any about what I've presented. And now I'll pass it to Joe and Dr. Jones to talk a little bit more about where we are with archaeology.
Thank you, Johnny. So let me start off with saying that we are not the first hands, feet, and shovels to touch ground at the site. And the Chattahoochee Brick owes a tremendous debt to the work of Professor Richard Betcher and his students at Southern Polytechnic University, now Kennesaw State. Professor Betcher discovered the Chattahoochee Brick site. Wonderful. He's in the audience. He used it as a field laboratory for his students who did architectural recording, did historical documentation, identified a number of different elements of the site. Most notably, he identified a plan that indicated the location of a temporary cemetery, and he had ideas about where that cemetery may have been present. And his was not the only study that was done on the site. Other studies done by Brockington and Associates in particular, who did a very detailed study, concluded that because of the industrial use of the site, there was simply nothing remaining that even warranted recording as an archaeological site, that it had no integrity. And of course, this is always a challenge when we as archaeologists are looking at industrial sites. They tend to be worked over and over and over again. So is there going to be anything surviving that can tell the story of that landscape? The landscape, by the way, is much bigger than the 75 acres. The In 1887, by that point in time, Chattahoochee Brick owned more than 1,000 acres. They had 200 acres of fields where they grew crops that were tended by the prison laborers for feeding themselves, for providing its own subsistence, because the factory was far enough away from the city of Atlanta. They had 200 hogs on the site. So it's much bigger than the 75 acres that we're looking at. And so here are some of the things that we wanted to try and achieve with the archaeological survey. We wanted to determine, was there any evidence of Native Americans on the site? Chattahoochee Brick is located on the land of the Muskogee. Standing Peach Creek Village, which was a major Muskogee village, mound complex, was just upriver. The Muskogee undoubtedly used this location. Even though Brockington had not found any evidence, we weren't convinced that none was there. We wanted to know, could we identify how the site was laid out over time, how it functioned? Could we then determine, were there any archaeological features that could be used to illustrate and express that history of the site? So we did this through a number of steps. We started off gathering information. Again, I've credited Professor Betcher. We have a historic American landscape document that 2 of the students prepared. We have a National Register draft nomination that 2 of the students prepared. Daniel Scott, who's one of the students, did extensive survey himself and provided all of his research and files. So we were well equipped there. We've done interviews, we've done archival research, and we've done mapping. One of the things we did is we took everything into GIS because we knew it's a complex landscape. We're going to be covering all this property. We're going to be seeing lots of things. How do we identify what period those things belong to? So we went, okay, now, yeah, there we go. We developed a GIS map that did overlays of the different physical features of the site as mapped by time period so we can identify them. And one of the challenges of Chattahoochee Brick is the factory had a major fire in 1900 that destroyed all the records that were associated with the factory. So we have no maps that predate 1911. However, we do have this wonderful Sanborn insurance map from 1907, updated in 1911. It shows the detailed layout of the factory, so we knew where the kilns were, we knew where the drying room was, we knew how the kiln operated, and we also knew where the locations of the leased labor barracks were at that point in time. Now, sometimes in historical archaeology, the most significant findings are not in the field, but they're in the archives. And so this is an image from the Dearborn. This is an image from the Georgia Historical Society. It is from the Dearborn Edwards collection. Dearborn Edwards is an Atlanta photographer who established his studio in 1888. The factory, it actually shows in the back rear ground here, you can see a rail car marked as the East Tennessee and Virginia and Georgia line. That was in operation to 1894. So we're pretty confident that this image dates to sometime between 1888 and 1894-95. Notable here is this structure, and we've got this image out at our table. You'll see it, if you drill in, you can see there are bars on the windows, bars on the doors. You drill in further, you will see these are convict leased laborers in front of the structure using a well. And we'll come back to this one in a minute. So here are the techniques that we use to identify and survey the site. The city, when they put out their scope of work for the project, for the full design project, they were very comprehensive. They provided all of the previous archaeological studies, so we had a strong idea of what was out there, what the conditions were. So we did a series of different techniques. First, we did a pedestrian survey of the entire property with shovel test pits excavated in the Chattahoochee River floodplain area. And we considered this to be the location that was most likely to contain American Indian remains. Even though none had been discovered in the previous surveys, we wanted to ensure that there were none present.
So if I could stop for 1 minute, if you could go back to the previous slide, this one. If everybody takes a moment and just look at this, GPR, just by a show of hands, how many people know what GPR is? Okay, so it's ground penetrating radar, which is the next slide. He's about to show you how that's done. But I want you to keep in mind what's happening here. When you see the equipment, what I want you to note is the area that doesn't have it in it is area that has lots of trees, which means you can't get the equipment in. But in order to survey, you actually have to do shovel test pits, so you have to break ground. But our most powerful form of knowing what's in the ground, comprehensive, is GPR. So when people make when we basically say we went out and we surveyed the area without actually digging, we don't have to dig anymore, and that's one of the beauties of technology. We can use GPR to give us an idea of if something's even here. And if it's not, we can kind of keep it moving. So when we get to the topic, which I know is at most people's head, cemeteries and burials, GPR is actually what we use currently all throughout the country on graveyards to delineate it, to find out where graves are buried. So once you actually do GPR, you'll know if there's a potential shaft, if there's not. Normally, once we know there's something potentially under the ground, that's when we go in and we break ground to see what's underneath it, what is the anomaly that's coming up in the GPR. So I want to give that little bit of context just so people understand why we aren't digging up the whole place. It's because we have this technology. So if you take a snapshot in your mind, keep that in your mind as Joe's continuing on through.
All right, so let me talk about the technologies we use. The shovel test survey was conducted primarily in the floodplain area. These are holes dug in the ground, earth from those holes screened to see if we see artifacts. We did not recover any American Indian artifacts. We did recover different industrial and domestic materials. We did a pedestrian survey along to see if we could identify any evidence of burial markers along the railroad. So we'll go into the cemetery a bit more as we move further on. Professor Betcher had identified plans that he believed indicated the relocation of the original cemetery from an area along the railroad tracks. And we looked in that area for any potential fieldstone markers. As Alex noted, we also did ground penetrating radar survey. So the GPR was based on what the mapping showed us where features were. This is ground penetrating radar works by sending radar waves into the ground and then measuring the time that elapses in their transmittal. If there is a depression, if there's an area where there's been excavation, the radar wave is going to travel farther in that same period of time. So we use GPR extensively in mapping historic cemeteries. It's very good at showing the profile of a burial. You'll see out at the table we have an illustration from another project of what a grave looks like in a GPR survey. GPR is also very useful for identifying if we could find features associated with the factory itself. So we identified the mapping. Now we needed to go to the next phase. So one of the challenges of the site, and one of the reasons probably that Brockington thought it had been completely disturbed, was that when General Shale came in and took over, they changed how the factory operated. So they became the owners in the 1970s, and they began mass manufacture of brick farther away from the original core area, but they were shipping it by truck. So that means they needed lots of places to park the trucks, and they needed lots of places to put their truck cargo containers, and they paved large areas of the original core factory. So under those paved surfaces, we can't do archaeological excavation by hand. These are mapping of the interpretations from the GPR results, and that shows the grids, and then we selected different locations to do trench excavations. So again, we have pavement. In this location, we have deep fill deposits. We're doing trenching to see, can we identify the locations of features associated with the factory.
I do want to jump in real quick and say just a visual. As you see this one, it has teeth on it. If it was a burial that we were looking, it would be a flat piece that you would use to just scrape evenly across in order to see if you can find burial shafts. So I don't want you to think when he's talking about trenching, this is what we're doing when we're going in and reviewing. This is the type of machinery that you use when you're looking for different features, architectural features, and you have to go down a certain amount. So just little things for you to catch as you're looking through these pictures.
And a note on that, Alex, we actually brought in the flat tooth bucket when we got down and we knew where the features were, but to get to the depth, we used the tooth. So in the area of the kiln, what we found is that the kilns are extremely well preserved. This is the location of one of the original Morrison Scove kiln, shows up on the 1911 Sanborn map, is likely first generation kiln built from the 1880s. You can see the patterning on the bricks over here. That is a herringbone pattern. That is the kiln floor. That was used. Herringbone was more stable for the kiln itself. These are the bricks for one of the walls. So basically what we are seeing is that the kilns are very well preserved. Next. Okay, I'm going to go back to the map that we showed earlier. So this is a close-up. You can see in the detail, you'll see that there are barracks, there are bars on the doors and windows. This is a raised building on a raised piers. You can see the stairs going up. Here you'll see prisoner leased laborers around a well, and they're wearing the prison stripes. So we knew this location was, and we were able to plot where this location was by other features on the site so that we could go in and examine it. Now, when we went in and did the trench there, we weren't actually expecting that we would see anything from this structure because it was on raised piers. And instead, the GPR was indicating there were anomalies. Great, so we'll go to the next one. So you'll see here, this level of brick, it's exactly 15 feet in length. Very distinctive, no brick here, no brick over on the other end. We don't know exactly what this is. We believe it's associated with that barracks that you saw in the earlier 1894 picture. We think it's possible that this was used as a surface underneath that raised structure so that in the event the prison laborers managed to try to escape by going under the floor, there would be something that would keep them from tunneling out and underneath the structure. And underneath that layer, we found some unusual features that appear to be potentially wood planks lying on the ground. There are also some post features there. The first generation of prison labor barracks on the property were kept in a stockade. We think this may be evidence of the location of the stockade. Now, in front of that structure, there was a well. We identified a series of brickworks that don't show up on any of the maps. They're potentially connected to the well. We don't know precisely what they are. This is one of the challenges of archaeology. Sometimes in trying to answer questions, you raise new questions. But again, sort of speaks to the level of preservation on the site. Now, I'm going back one more time to this image. You'll note here in the view on the right, and there's a detail of this at our table. You can see these marks, okay? And they're going away, if you'll recall, the factory's back this way. So where are those marks going? And what are those marks? All right, examining their formation, we're confident that these are the marks that would be made if you're walking wearing shackles. And the prisoners at the Chattahoochee brick site were shackled at all times. So these are the marks made by the prisoners walking wearing shackles. Where are they going? Well, we plotted the location that we'd be going in. They were heading toward the area that became the walled garden. And lo and behold, in that area, Brockington and Associates, when they had done machine stripping to see if there were burials in the walled garden, had come across a privy. And they'd come across artifacts in the privy. They hadn't identified the privy as belonging to the prisoner leased labor period. So we believe that these artifacts are associated with the prisoners. We even brought some with us so that you can see and handle them, or you can see and experience them. So in the review of other convict labor sites that have been looked at archaeologically, what we see is that there were very few places where the prisoners were out of the guard, or out of supervision by the guards. Going to the outhouse would have been one of those places. Going to the outhouse would have been one of the locations where the prisoners had the opportunity for their own behaviors. So here's our preliminary findings. We've identified that the site is actually very well preserved in terms of the historic core. We have not identified the location of the temporary cemetery, nor have we identified the location of an original cemetery. So what happened to human remains? We know there are deaths on the site. We actually now know that we have one newspaper article referring to a burial on the site. So we know there is a cemetery on the site. Were all the graves placed in that cemetery? No. Unfortunately, a number of them were sent to the local medical colleges where they were used for dissection. We have heard reports that there were bodies that were thrown into the river. We know that the convicts, when they tried to escape into the river was one of the ways that they attempted to do that. We know not all of them survived. It is likely that some of the leased prison laborers drowned in the river. We've heard stories that they might have been cremated in the kilns. That's possible, although that would have required the factory to use fuel to burn them, and it would have disrupted the firing in the kilns if that happened at that time. Professor Betcher reported that he believed they were buried along the railroad. Burying along the railroad would have made sense. That was land that the factory was never going to need to use. They weren't going to be excavating for clay banks there. So it seemed like a likely location where prisoners may have been buried. We have not identified burials there yet. We have human remains detection dogs that have been out on the site. trying to identify if there's any evidence. So far, we're not seeing anything from their findings, but we will continue to look at that area with ground penetrating radar, and we continue to ground hope that we may find some evidence of the location of the burials. Now, there will be an unexpected burial discovery plan for the park, regardless of whether or not what we find in this process. And that will ensure that should burials be encountered during another phase, that there'll be a plan in place for how to treat them. Now, we know what we know about the site, but what we don't know is what you may know about the site. So Alex will talk to you about how you can help us.
So we have a table directly outside. One, if you have questions, come and talk to us. Ask us, your questions, because I know quite a few people have had questions, but just haven't actually asked us. So please come. But also, if you have additional information or things that you may want to know, if you're interested in the report, if you'd like to see, there is a video. Joe didn't mention that part, but there is a video as well. All of that information you can get from our table, so please come out and talk with us. But just again, you saw the map area of where the GPR has been done. That does not negate, when we talk about how large this original property was and how much acreage he originally owned, there is the potential for other things, which is why accidental discovery, like a burial discovery plan, has been put in play. So for at any point anything is discovered outside of the area or in another place, a plan has already been put in action. So just so that the community knows, this isn't something that's in the back of our minds, but at the forefront of our minds as we're moving through this process. We are being thoughtful and intentional as we're moving through this, and we really are doing above and beyond. So even though you have the dogs, the fact that we're going behind them with the GPR is basically to show you how intentional we are about this work and how committed we are to it. So please feel free to come out and talk to us at the table. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kevin from Tool.
Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Bacon. I'm from Tool Design. We're leading the Atlanta Riverlands component of the study. I'll be as brief as possible this morning because I know we're eager to get out and see all the great content that we have to share with you today and have those conversations. The Atlanta Riverlands, just as a reminder, is our biggest and most foundational opportunity to connect Atlanta to the river, including the Chattahoochee brick site right there at the heart of the river. It's one of our biggest, most important sites. This also is our third workshop. We've been building since November on things that you've given us in terms of vision and goals, as well as when we were here in March, mapping your own Riverlands, telling us where you wanted the alignments to go, what you wanted to connect to. And today we're bringing you three very different looks at where the main stem trail could potentially go and where it could connect to based on what we've learned, all with the intent of coming back to you from what we learned today in terms of your preferred choice of where you'd like to see that and how that trail should be designed and planned. Come on, clicker. There we go. When we were here back in March, or at our other location, if you joined us, this was the activity. We had over 50 different maps with lots of great ideas and drawings of where the trail should go and where it should connect to. We also got a lot of great comments here. These are some of the most important ones that we got that I'll synthesize generally into two main things. One is understanding kind of the ecological restorative opportunity that the trail brings to the access of the Chattahoochee, so making sure that we're being thoughtful in terms of bringing a trail close to the Chattahoochee, but using that as an opportunity for ecological restoration. And then number two, also realizing that as a larger transportation piece of infrastructure, all of the connections it can make to community destinations and beyond, and so how do we balance those two things? And then for any alignment that we're thinking about, some of the potential repercussions or consequences in terms of anti-displacement, thinking about strategies and how we get ahead of that, now having a lot of other trail projects across the country and being able to be more thoughtful ahead of the game on those. Oh. Can I get some help from there? We go. The other thing in terms of community engagement, we spent a lot of time on the river and wanted to share some of the photographs from along the Riverlands just to see how dynamic that landscape is. It's easy to take a lot of things for granted looking at it on just a flat piece of paper. You can see the topography, the change in landscapes. We can see the desired lines, like near Whittier Mill, where there's a lot of already soft trails of people wanting to cut their own way. We've found and mapped a lot of those. We see places where existing trails already exist, like the Whetstone Creek Trail, abandoned railroads, easements. We've hiked a lot of those, miles and miles. So there's a lot of that thinking that's going into the refinement of where that alignment can go as well. So what you'll see today are three different alignments. One, and we're not ranking these as A, B, and C. These are just different choices. A keeps you along the river. It's a refinement of what we had from the 2020 regional study that really takes into account community feedback as well as what we've really put in boots on the ground with. I'll jump over to C, which is still kind of our pressure relief valve, Fulton Industrial Boulevard, Bolton, some of those major street ones, which is our path of least resistance. It's our easiest one. But what we didn't have before is B, which is a third option that really understands that if we have these longer-term challenges along the potential preferred alignment along the trail, along the river, where else could that go that connects to some of these sites and other experiences such as Chattahoochee Brick? So we're not saying at any point any of these are right or wrong. These are just three different physical ways we think that this alignment could go, and part of what we're looking for today is what we like. There's a lot of opportunities to jump between some of these, so you'll see the way that we've structured this today is in different sections. They all deal with kind of property issues, brownfields, physical constraints. So where these are all broken is there's actually an opportunity to mix and match a little bit. So if you like to be along the river in one section, or as you get into, say, section 2 and come in a little bit more to the Chattahoochee Brick site or these adjacent neighborhoods, there's some thoughtfulness that we can revise these different alignments to adjust to the feedback that we've heard. You'll also see for the Chattahoochee Brick site, we don't have an alignment in the site right now. We have mapped where we think potential connection points, entry points could, and this is the moment in the process as the Chattahoochee Brick Company site is ready to be designed. We can work with that team to think about should an alignment or could an alignment come within that site as a part of the design process. We've also got goals and criteria for you to give us your feedback on. Some of those on the positive side are how are we evaluating alignments with respect to visions and goals and opportunities and many of the positive things. On the other hand, we have a lot of criteria that are dealing with just the feasibility and the constructability, dealing with wetlands and brownfield sites. So when we start to evaluate these, it's important for us to know, one, are we capturing everything based on comments in the way that we're going to evaluate this, and two, are there any of these criteria that should be weighted, are especially important? So that's another point of feedback we'd like to get today. So when you come to our section of the table, you'll see 3 different segments and a way to talk about what we like about alignments, dislike about those, or changes that you want to suggest. That will help us over the next couple months as we get ready to come back with fine-tuning these alignments based on things that we hear from you all and working our way towards a preferred alignment. And and the way that we kind of think about those is it'll be more of a ranked evaluation. One, there are places where it really aligns with the vision and goals for the project. It's very easy. It makes a lot of sense. Those are going to score the highest. There are places where we really want to see it to happen, but the challenges are seeming almost impossible, and will we be patient and will we persevere and pursue that alignment, working our way down to places that are just really hard to put a trail through. They don't provide a lot of value and experience. Those will score lower, and things that we'll be looking at other alternatives to be really that main stem alignment. So as you're looking at those today, that's two big questions to be thinking about is, one, is there a preference over one alignment or the other? Why? What do we like about those two? And as we're looking at our goals and criteria, should we be prioritizing those, or is there anything that's missing? So when you're talking to us at the tables in the corner here in the atrium, we'd love to talk about those items. So thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Ricarius, and nobody has talked about this yet. He's our project manager, and it's his birthday today. So you got to be nice to him today. Happy birthday.
Well, I was going to see if I can get through the day without telling people that. But thank you for being here with us. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you for sitting with us as we provided these project updates. Now is the opportunity where we get to hear more from you. And so we will invite you to our feedback stations where we will have stations to inform the park memorial, next steps, the Riverlands Trail. So as you just heard from Kevin, we're working on one preferred alignment. Right now there are 3, but when we come back in July, we'll be working to present one preferred alignment to the group. And today, since we are just now kicking off design, we really want to develop the concept with you. And so we have some look and feel boards, which are essentially trying to get the character or the vibe or the characteristics that you would like to see in the park and the memorial. And so you have the opportunity to use sticky notes, stickers, tell us what you want to prioritize, what you don't want to prioritize, and why for both of those. And that will be used by the design team to inform I'm sorry if I'm boxing y'all out. I know I'm a pretty big person. So that will be used to inform our design moving forward. And so I think Kate said this earlier, we will come back in July for the CBC site with 2 design concepts, which takes into account what we've heard from you today, but also what we've been hearing from our small group conversations and our past engagement events. So in addition to that, as you heard from Dr. Jones and Dr. Joseph from New South and Jones Archaeology, there will also be the opportunity to continue to engage with the archaeology team, ask any questions about the work that they've been doing, and also see some of the artifacts that they have or that have been put into our possession, let's just say. Sorry, I didn't explain that right. It's all good. And then, as you have also heard, we have this quilting station, which is really meant to be an opportunity to work collectively to honor the history of this site, the victims at this site, with this communal quilt. And then lastly, we have the contemplation room and also a lot of other important stations from the Trust for Public Lands, the Department of Parks and Rec, and I believe the City of Atlanta also has the Brownfield team here as well. And I will just say we have a few key questions here that we want you to think about today. These questions will be, you'll be reminded of these once you get to the open house. But again, this is really meant to inform the design moving forward. And I will then remind you that our July 25th goals are to present 2 initial concepts for the park memorial and to share the preferred trail alignment for the Riverlands project. And so I'm just excited to be in front of you today to just continue to work towards advancing the Atlanta Riverlands, I know, and the Chattahoochee Brick Company site. And so before we invite you to the open house, I'd like for you just to take a picture of this or scan the QR code. And so when you leave, there's also some printouts that Stacy and the Chrysalis team can provide to you. But just before you leave, so after you do the exercise at the open house, we'd love to hear your feedback just to help us continue to make these events serve you as best that we can. So with that, I will invite you to our open house where some of the team will be standing to engage with you on this project. Thank you so much.